So
Good.
you can now start.
Okay. Welcome to the session on the BundleUp project here at the Covenant of Mayors Investment Forum Energy Efficiency Finance Marketplace. My name is Martin Eibel. I'm a senior project advisor at the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, an executive agency that was set up by the European Commission on the 1st of April this year. A new agency basically, which is dealing with a lot of EU funding programs supporting the implementation and delivery of the European Green Deal. One of those programs is the LIFE program, which some of you might know from the past. It's already around for almost 30 years. And the LIFE program has now an additional sub-program, which is called Clean Energy Transition sub-program. Which is the successor program, if you like, of the energy efficiency call under the Horizon 2020 program. And the Horizon 2020 energy efficiency program has actually funded the BundleUp project, which we are going to present today. And also it has funded a lot of other projects which you see in the program, in the agenda of the Covenant of Mayors Investment Forum. If you like to learn more about the LIFE Clean Energy Transition sub-program and the funding opportunities in the future, then you can visit our virtual stand at the virtual exhibition tomorrow afternoon, the CINEA LIFE stand. And there's also a dedicated session on the LIFE Clean Energy Transition and Climate Action programs, which is taking place also tomorrow. I mean, check the agenda. And you will see the information session. We'll have one speaker here, Manuel Nina from GoParity, who is Chief Commercial Officer of GoParity, which is a crowdfunding platform in Portugal, focusing on sustainable and impactful investments, crowdfunding investments, if you like. And amongst those is, of course, also projects focusing on energy efficiency, renewable energy. And GoParity is the coordinator of the BundleUp project that is focusing on triggering investments, sustainable energy investments, so both energy efficiency and renewable energy investments in the public sector in Portugal. And Manuel will give you a good overview of the project results so far, because the BundleUp project has finished this year, and they have a successor project that is starting actually also this year, which is called the BundleUp NEXT, so the next generation, if you like. And before I give the floor to Manuel, just to tell you that we have a presentation of around 30 minutes now, and then a question and answer session. You can use the chat, please, to answer your question anytime. So we'll read out the questions later on. So if you have anything, please put it right in the chat, and we will address the questions then after the presentation of Manuel. Okay, and with that, I'll give the floor to Manuel, please.
Thank you, Martin. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manuel from GoParity. And I think you should be seeing my screen now. So I am here to tell you about the succession of these projects that has been BundleUp and now BundleUp NEXT. This BundleUp was a CSA that ran for 3 years and just finished in May this year. And the objective of this project was to, in the end, to put together in a single place all the stakeholders for sustainable energy in Portugal. So in the sense, have a one-stop shop that could solve a lot of gaps that were identified in the past by previous studies. So in the same place, and this is a website that is in Portuguese, wherever it's an open site that people can register, which is called Ponto Energia. We gather promoters, and that means public and private organizations that want to have a sustainable energy project. This means that can come from a simple idea of I should have solar panels, but I don't know what to do, to I've done an energy audit and I really know what I have to do, but I don't have, let's say, legal support, money, or I need several specialists. That's where the specialists come along. So it's like an open marketplace for engineering consultancy companies, ESCOs, PV installers, etc., that can basically provide their services to whoever asks for them. And then investors in the sense that they could be funds, they could be also GoParity as a crowd lending platform that basically pitches in to give or to provide investment and loans. Now, as I mentioned, the project that is now starting and the one that closed came from a background, and the background that we had in the original BundleUp projects was that we implemented 62 projects, separate projects of energy efficiency and renewable energy, and that we were able to raise 41 million euros of investments. This led to around 44 gigawatt hours of energy savings per year, and also 3.4 megawatts of installed PV for self-consumption. This is important to understand that while Portugal has a very positive and easy way well, a good business case to install solar panels for self-consumption, and the idea here is to focus on decentralized installations, which is what we were able to do. So none of these 3.4 megawatts are a big solar plant. They are all 20 kilowatt, 50 kilowatt, 250 kilowatts is the biggest. So inside this 3.4 megawatt are in fact 30 or 40 installations of small businesses that are now more resilient, and they are gathering directly the savings from the sun, in the sense, and decarbonizing the grid. And out of these 41 million euros, we were able to raise 2 million euros in private funding, especially for crowd lending. And this was actually one of the big objectives of the project, is not only to promote public funding or public investment, but also involve private actors such as funds and the crowd lending funding. What we did see was that unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we saw since March, April last year, as everyone knows, we saw a huge break in investment. So the uncertainty in what was the future was restricting the investments of the private sector. And we have a rough estimation that we left around 10 million euros that were not implemented because of the pandemic, and that are now starting to come again to the pipeline. And overall, this led to the reduction of 18 kilotons of CO2 per year. And you have to understand that Portugal has already a very decarbonized grid. So we have around 50% of renewable energy in our electricity mix. So if we had done this in another country, it could have a bigger impact even. Now, this was the lesson learned from the last 3 years. And one of the things was that we were restricted to one of the five largest energy agencies in Portugal, because we found out that these are some of the best connection points to the local communities, namely public authorities, but also one of the sectors that we were not able to develop as much as we wanted because of the pandemic, which is the third sector, the what we call the charities, the social sector, nursing homes, kindergartens, and all those associations, many of them non-profit, that have a huge potential to improve. Many of them have needs of retrofitting that need financing, that need auditing, and we were not able to reach them because of the pandemic. They had serious crises of infections and all the related issues. So one of the things we did with this new project was to step up the scale And we brought about a DEN. A DEN is the National Energy Agency, and they focus a lot on the public sector, not at municipal level, but more on the let's say, imagine the Department of Justice that has hundreds of courts around Portugal that could be retrofitted and could receive solar panels. We have the infrastructures of Portugal that manages the roads and the tunnels that have a potential for solar panels. All these things are going to be brought by a DEN. And the major focus here will be how can we get away from what's it called? So structural funds, and more towards how can we make investment funds, private investment funds, get in the game of working with this public sector, and the role of ESCOs here, which is crucial. And the second way we wanted to increase the scope of our project was to not select specific agencies, energy agencies that operate at municipal level, but to collect the contribution of the national network of agencies. And then this was actually a very interesting work that we could do due to the regulation of these grants, of the commission grants and the LIFE, or in this case, Steel Horizon 2020, which is through the association, we can support in small amounts each of their members, and therefore we can basically support a project anywhere in Portugal. So that's the second big advantage of this new consortium. And finally, we have SRS Lawyers, which is one of the top 5 lawyer councils in Portugal, and they are specialized in ESCOs, and I will tell you some stories on what barriers we were able to break in the BundleUp project over the last 3 years. So in the end, what we saw in the past is that many projects that have high saving potentials and they are viable, economically viable, do not reach the implementation phase. Many of them cannot get financing. Many of them do not have scale, for example, and a lot of them suffer, especially from the public sector. They suffer from bureaucracy, especially from what is the public tendering procedures. And many times these tendering procedures can be simplified, but public actors do not have the knowledge, or more than the knowledge is the confidence to navigate such endeavors. So many municipalities will prefer to say, I don't want to do an ESCO contract, because if I have problems with the National Court of Accountants, it's not worth it. So I prefer not to do my small self-consumption installation in the local swimming pool or the theater or wherever. So, and that applies for what areas? We have efficiency in buildings and retrofitting. We have the self-consumption, solar. We have the upgrade to LED lights, both indoor LED lighting. We have the solar thermal and the public lighting, which is actually one of the major results of the previous BundleUp project. The original one was we saw a major objective of municipalities to understand that the business case for public lighting is mature. It's very easy to break even, to pay back. So there was a, let's say, a boom in Portugal over the last 3 years in public lighting. The methodology that we are applying, and that this comes from, let's say, an evolution of what we learned in BundleUp, is we start with a very large pipeline because there are many opportunities, and we know from the start that many of them will not reach the final stage. But sometimes as we push them along the pipeline and we help them develop, sooner or later they will become a project. We provide the technical, the legal, and the financial assistance. This needs to be, of course, adjusted to the maturity level of the project and the opportunity. And then, if possible, we focus a lot on the aggregation and the standardization. When we did the first application of this project back in 2018, we were seeing that the bundling of projects was going to be the silver bullet. But actually, we found out that In larger municipalities, the bundling is of course the best way to get value for money because if you're going to do similar installations in similar swimming pools which have the same age of uh, natural gas boilers or solar thermal, then it's all the same thing, and there's a learning experience here for installers. But for smaller projects, actually, for example, the crowd lending was a good example of how you can make viable small projects like 50,000 euros, 70,000 or 100,000 euros for small private players mostly and the social sector. And they don't need to be bundled, but they just need that push to have a very simplified access to finance that crowd lending does. So as we have time, and this is a detailed presentation, I will go deeper into these aspects. And the nice part of this is that we actually felt these limitations on our hands. And the first of them are technical, of course. If you are supporting a municipality that is in the countryside with low density of population, and you have a skeleton crew in your technical department, there are lack of technical skills, and so we cannot expect them to do energy audits and assessments, and they actually are very vulnerable to some private actors that can show up, present an offer, but they don't have a reference point. So one of the things that we do with our marketplace, with Ponto Energia, is to provide several offers to municipalities, even if we do the technical support. The second thing is exactly the lack of the awareness of top management, sometimes mayors, and the technical bodies about some of the economic and environmental benefits of sustainable energy investments. And many times these are triggered by, if my neighbor changed the LED lights, the public lighting, then I will do it too. And what we're trying to break with this idea of having a national consortium is to provide all the agencies and all the municipalities with the best cases and the use cases that we did in the last 3 years, and let's say invite them to do the same over the next 3 years, and making use not only of public funding, many of them the structural funds that are available in Portugal, but also leverage on the private funds and ESCOs. And that's was mostly the issue here. We have actually a very interesting use case that we started seeing, which is we have a certain generation of equipment, namely even kindergartens and schools and fire brigades, fire stations that have roofs with asbestos. These are from the late 80s, early 90s. And the substitution of these roofs is very expensive, and it has not that much market study, in the sense it's not cost efficient. But when we start approaching some of these actors with the idea that, okay, you need to take care of your roof, but you can add on with the self-consumption solar panels, and you can actually, if you add 2 years to the solar panels payback, you pay the whole thing. So instead of paying back in 4.5, 5 years, if you do something on 7, 8 years, it pays itself with the revenues of the solar panels. So this is actually a new use case that we've just closed in 2021, and we are showing it to the national actors. In terms of legal, it's the same thing. If it's a small municipality and you have public procurement, you're going to usually do things as you always have done. So if you show up with a ESCO contract or a EPC, then it's really the position that we saw from many mayors was, I am more frightened of the work that I can have by an audit from the Court of Auditors of Portugal than to have solar panels in my buildings. So that's where our lawyers come in, the partner SRS. And we had this amazing work, which was 2 years of, let's say, evangelizing a big municipality. They are actually pretty big. It's one of the 10 largest cities in Portugal, but they were really not confident in moving to 3.5 million euro ESCO contract with for public lighting. And we the lawyers went there. They had first a meeting with the mayor and the vice mayor. Then they had a meeting with the head of units of the legal and the technical department. And after that, and some emails, they were really confident that they would be able to join and to launch a public tender of 3.5 million euros for public lighting. And it's a self-evident project. It's almost 15,000 light points, and now it's been launched, it's being contracted, and I think it's going to be finalized this year. So we have, and all because of trust, to be sure that they were being confidently accompanied by the lawyers. That's also where, for this new consortium, ADEN comes in, which is the National Energy Agency, because they are focusing a lot on how to leverage public, ESCO models, not in the municipality side, but on the national public authorities. So schools, courts, police stations, all those things that are replicable around the country. So if you are able to break this barrier, then a sudden huge opportunity opens up. Also the army, actually, we have a letter of support from the army of Portugal that wants to provide support for this, and then we think about ways to conjugate, to mingle this funding, and we are waiting now for the final directions of the resilience fund, so the bazooka, the big support money that is coming from Europe. And we know that the government has put sustainable energy as a priority. So we want to explore those opportunities. How can part of the project be, for example, structural funds, and then part of the project be for an ESCO? And we know actually that for the private actors, this is possible. So the ESCO can do a turnkey solution where they say 30% of the construction is structural fund or recovery fund based, and the rest we can do with project financing, either in crowd lending or also with an investment fund. So that was it. And for the financial, I will just tell you that one of the things we saw, especially in the social sector, was that banks are very one-tracked minded. So they approach, for example, a charity that has, for example, a managing group, managing a board of management that is voluntary. They don't receive salaries. Many of this happens in the countryside. And they go to them and say, you want a loan for your solar panels, you have to give a personal warranty of someone that is a director of, let's say, a charity, but they do not receive a salary and they're volunteering. So that was a big market gap, a barrier that crowd lending actually broke, because we at GoParity are completely satisfied to use only the equipment as a warranty, not the personal warranty of the board members. So that was a way to solve this. And we also developed legal documents that show that municipalities can use crowd lending, especially if they want to involve the citizens in their sustainable energy projects in Portugal. So just overall, how we talk about this is we need to have, of course, a project maturity level, and we accept projects from all these levels. Sometimes they come as an opportunity, but no one knows what's that. And that's where we can call, for example, 3 installers to provide their audits and their offers. Then if there's already an audit, we can do a budgeting, a technical budgeting, and then the final technical solution. And then also focus on the business case, if we can do it by an ESCO, by how much self investment can these entities do. And then curiously, even the final stages, when the tender is launched, and there is sometimes the need for, especially in the last stages, the legal support if we're going for public tendering and ESCO models, but also supporting the final stages of the tenders. in getting the best solutions selected. I will go this very quickly. This is what we are saying in let's say in more detailed points, but it's and the presentation will be available. This is a bit what we do as we are going now for the next project. So not only increasing the details in the technical, legal, and financing, but also the way to build upon the local strategies that have been done under the Covenant of Mayors, for example, for municipalities. And this is what led us to find a big pipeline for projects here in Portugal for this new project, the BundleUp NEXT. And then how can we match this with the investors, with the legal obligations, and up to tender launch or investment. So as a result, what we got over the last 3 years was clearly, of course, we had own funds from many public agents to do this, and then some private agents as well. When they found out that you could pay back a self-consumption system for solar panels in 4.5 years, many of them would say, well, we can afford that, so they would go forward, or they would come to crowdlending. We had ERDF funds, and also now the resilience and recovery plan funds. We had ESCO projects, some of them in which quite a high intensity of installation, especially public lighting. We saw some very interesting examples of not only the loans, but the renting of equipment and the leasing, the funds, and the crowdlending, as I've mentioned, which has a very positive aspect of not only involving the community, but showing the community what's happening at their level. So we had SMEs that wanted to open and communicated that they were going to install solar panels or improve their efficiency. We had schools that went to the parents of their students and told them, well, we're going to have a crowdlending loan. So if you are a parent here, you can join and lend money to the school, but still get some interest rate back, and we are becoming more sustainable and greener. So our starting point with this new next project is these 56 projects that have a huge saving potential. These will be 49 million euros of investment, but we need to understand that the initial pipeline that came to us was over 107 millions. We just selected those that we think are more viable, but over the course of these 3 years, our objective is not 49 million, is whoever comes, even more than 107, because we're opening up to everyone. And this idea now that we should have 100% national coverage. And I will tell you, even in the islands of Portugal, so Madeira and the Azores, which have a unbundled energy grid, we want to have solar projects and efficiency projects there that can show that even in let's say regulated markets where the electricity is cheaper, we can still be cost efficient and show that there can be sustainable energy investments. Just to give you a bit of what's inside those 49 millions, we have deep renovation in buildings, fleet electricization. So we have a lot of fleets moving from current combustion engines to full electric. We're not talking hybrids here, it's full electric systems, and public lighting. So and these are the numbers. So we focus on SMEs, also the private social care, and local and central administration, and also of course focusing both on the central administration and the local administration, so municipalities and parishes and all that. These will lead, as I mentioned, to huge savings and the renewable energy production, and this of course has this equivalent in CO2 and trees. And I remind you that Portugal has a very low intensity grid, so this is actually pretty ambitious in the end. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to tell you about BundleUp and BundleUp NEXT. And I was the technical manager of the project, so any questions you have, I am happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. That was spot on time, half an hour. Very well done. There were a few comments in the chat, but there's also one question. So I'll read that out. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We are going to read them out so that everybody can hear that, also for the recording. And yeah, the first question here comes from Robert Panetta, who is asking, how do you combine structural funds and ESCO projects?
Okay, so what we saw was that in a first wave of projects that came to us, the structural funds were actually a very high co-financing. So we actually provided a white paper to the Portuguese government and to the European Union, where if you're talking about deep renovation, it makes all sense to be to have a larger component of co-funding. But if you're talking about public lighting that has a business case of 1.5 years of payback, then the money shouldn't be going there. So what we saw was in some projects where, for example, there was a limited subsidy from structural grants, then the ESCO can show up and present this as a turnkey solution. So they would say, look, the investment is 100, we have a subsidy for 30, and then we will do project finance with you guys and the revenue sharing for the remaining 70, for example. So in that sense, they can integrate the two aspects.
Thank you very much. And that has happened a lot in your BundleUp project, or how often did that happen that you could combine that?
So I think we did do it 3 or 4 times, but
okay.
Many of these projects they had such a large amount of co-funding that the municipalities would take the risk for themselves and do a self-investment on own funds. I think further down the road, and now with this new recovery and resilience plan, there is the aim that the co-financings are lower, and the ESCOs have a critical role here to take part, for sure.
Okay, good, super. Again, a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions now, please ask, put the question in the chat. In the meantime, I also have a question, because you mentioned, you gave the example of this municipality in Portugal, which had you know, a big project on street lighting, very straightforward technically for sure. Also in terms of financing, it's not a complicated story as such. And you said that there was resistance for the energy performance contracting, really. I mean, energy performance contracting is something we are seeing in many projects we are funding, because as we said before in the plenary as well, our Director General, Ditte Juul Jorgensen from DG Energy, she also mentioned that we need to leverage in private investments to make Europe energy efficient overall, to reach our objectives, European objectives. So how did you sell that then finally to the local authority? Is there any tips and tricks you can give in terms of taking their fear away from energy performance contracting, which of course may be very opaque for them, because they don't know the concept often, they don't have the kind of financial understanding behind that concept. How can that be done? Because that is probably a lot of listeners may also come across this issue.
That's a very good question, Martin, and it's one of the good examples of what we were really happy to achieve at the end of the first project, which was we had the basis is the agency was with us. The agency wanted this to happen, the energy agency. And the agency had a very good relationship with the technical department. So through the technical department, we were able to start meeting with the tendering department, because they already met them, knew each other. And that's where we brought the lawyers that had this nice reputation for being very knowledgeable and have done this before, and we provided legal counsel. And as soon as this was the basis, we had to involve the mayor to tell him in the end that this was, let's say, a big change for the city and it would provide a lot of savings. but that they could never pay it from their own pockets because it was a €3.5 million investment up front. And of course, we had to tell them, look, and this municipality and this municipality has done it as well. So they didn't want to be the first movers, but they were a bit more satisfied that if others had done it, they could too. They just needed to be supported. So the idea is there needs to be an open door. It starts bottom up for sure, technical and law and tendering departments, but then you need to have the top down support as a big work for the municipality. And another thing that might have helped is that this was tendered last year, and this year is election year. So now the city will have amazing new lights for this summer, and then elections are in October. So everyone's happy, you know.
You brightened up the election campaign.
Yeah, yeah.
But
there's in the end a very interesting story, which was this municipality joined and finalized it, and then the one next to it wanted to. So then they come to us and they said, oh, I've heard that you have lawyers that are helping City A doing this. So we're from the City B and we want to do it too. And the funny part was that the first project was €3.5 million, and the city that came after is a €9 million project. So it's even bigger and more impactful, and it was actually faster to help them. So one thing brought the other.
So it's the famous ever recurring story. If my neighbor has it, I want it too. So which is probably a good selling argument. If you have one good example, one good case study that can trigger a lot of other cities to follow suit, basically.
Exactly.
So I'll look at the chat. There is at the moment I don't see any question, but I still would have one. On the you said in your presentation that you had in the BundleUp project around 56 projects and almost 50 million of investments. In terms of energy savings, the percentages, when we look at the public buildings, what was your ambition there in terms of energy savings? And was it difficult to get actually municipalities to go for rather ambitious energy savings than low-hanging fruits of 10, 15%? I mean, what was your experience there? How can you make municipalities to really future-proof their public buildings in that sense?
Indeed, Martin. The thing that we saw was there was a lot of low-hanging fruit with public lighting, and that was something that everyone needed and wanted support for. We did see significant deep renovation, and those were actually bundles, which was very interesting, in social housing that is run by the municipality. So when you're talking about social housing, there was more interest from the municipality to, let's say, future-proof those buildings, because people live inside, and if you do a good thermal increase of quality of living, then it's good for those people as well. So that we saw, and we had a big social that will be actually presented in our final report that will be available next month for everyone to consult it. But at public buildings themselves, we did not have that many interest in deep renovation, unfortunately. Many of them did renovate the internal lighting, but that's also a low-hanging fruit. The other area we saw with a lot of deep renovation were swimming pools, because they have this big intervention where they change the heating, the burners and the heaters and the solar panels and all that. But those are, let's say, high consumption municipal buildings that they understand that they have such a big energy bill that they need to, that they are interesting to change. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It is indeed something we also insist very much in our project development assistance projects. You are one of them, PDA projects as we call them, which are spread. We have over 50 projects funded now under Horizon 2020 and previously under the Intelligent Energy program. We will continue to fund those kind of projects under the Life Clean Energy Transition sub-program. But we have insisted a lot on rather deep renovation in the past because we don't want to lock these buildings. And it is very hard, as you probably know from your experience, that to convince the asset owners to do something with the buildings, it's quite hard. So if they touch it, they should really touch it properly and future-proof as much as possible. I mean, another common challenge we've seen across projects is with public buildings, that in terms of the ownership duration, basically, because a lot of buildings change often in a project portfolio, because municipalities don't know how long they will keep the building, for example. And that sometimes also leads to a rejection of doing anything with the building, because you can always say, well, we don't know if you need a school in the next 10-15 years, or we don't know if we will keep the office building in the next 20 years, so we're not going to invest something. Is there any, from your experience having dealt with public buildings, is there any good recipe in convincing municipalities again to actually go for it and do the renovation, or has that been an issue for you, the ownership and
sometimes we are not, we cannot understand the reasoning behind some of the municipalities. So they might have that rationale in their back of their heads, but they are not communicating with us. What has happened is sometimes we are presented with a pipeline of 10 opportunities, and then only 3 happen, and we don't know why. But one thing that did show up, which is actually something that we were not really able to solve that much, is if you go into historical buildings. That starts to complicate even more the question, because even if there's motivation by the municipality, there can be overlapping jurisdictions. So there's a need to ask permission to the Ministry of Culture, and then things start becoming a bit. I personally was trying to develop a solar project, so self-consumption in a church in Lisbon, and it got stuck for 2 years in the Ministry of Culture, and it was going to be very discrete panels in the point of a roof in the center of Lisbon. But unfortunately, after 2 years, we saw that we couldn't move ahead because there were so many permissions that, you know.
Yeah. No, I see that is, I mean, historical buildings is definitely also quite another bird, but there are more, let's say, there are many more other types of buildings that we could work with now, and which need to be worked with over the next coming years in Europe. So I think there are a lot of challenges ahead of us for the renovation wave over the coming years. Thanks very much, Manuel. I think we need to close now because we are running out of time. I just want to take this opportunity to raise a couple of points to the audience. So the next session in this strand will be from the EEF fund with the Spanish city of Chillon, I think in Spain, on public building renovation. So you're welcome to listen into that session. It will start at 4 o'clock sharp. If you want to jump to another strand, you can consult the program. And again, all the sessions will start at 1600 hours. There's also the networking opportunity. Please make use of that. If you have logged on and you go to your dashboard, you see the networking opportunities. You can do bilaterals, you can do one-to-one meetings. So please use this opportunity. And finally, I'd like to thank you, Manuel, for this very informative presentation. And we wish you all the best of luck with the next generation of BundleUp. And all the best, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you all.